You know, folks, when I was growing up and in junior high, I looked 100% Chinese, even though I'm only 50% Chinese. Now, the significance of that is that there was another Asian kid in my class. The only two were me and him. And he was the smart one, and I was the other one. Anyway, sometimes the teachers would get us mixed up. Who knows why? And they would ask me these difficult questions in front of the whole class and try to embarrass me, like, or who was the first president of the United States? Or what's 4 divided by 2? I'd look at her and I'd say, what do you think I am, some kind of genius? You want that other kid, right? So anyway, that's the kind of situation that we have also here in Office 365. Because we actually have 2 distinct accounts, but they look exactly the same. It looks like trainers in both places, not exactly the same accounts. So what we want to do here is to help minimize confusion and make sure that things synchronize properly, especially with things like passwords, with Office 365 in your Active Directory on premises. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that's done. So here I've gone to Active Directory users and computers to illustrate this. Now notice that I have a Haley Hansen here and a trainer account. I also have Haley Hansen and trainer on Office 365 created in the cloud, right? Initially they looked very much the same, right? The same email address that we see right here, the same user principal name, which usually matches the email address. Okay, it's all looks the same. Once again, one of these might be the smart kids and the other one's the not so smart kid or something like that, right? So anyway, they're totally different accounts in the cloud than what we see here. In fact, let me go back over here. Okay, here's my users just as a refresher. Okay, even though they look the same, totally different accounts. They exist only in the cloud right now. We want to address that here with something called the Azure Active Directory Connect tool. This is the latest version. There's other tools that do this from Microsoft, but I'm going to show you the latest and greatest one. Once again, also, this is not part of the exam. For those of you that are interested in the 70-697. However, this is a very important practical matter for those of us that manage Active Directory and Office 365. So let's go ahead and track this. So to get this thing kicked off, you would kind of think that we'd go to domains, because after all, we want to import our domain and really synchronize our domain with Azure Active Directory using that connector, but that's not what we're going to do. This domain's right here. It really relates more to the email functionality that I talked about earlier, or setting up a web page if you wanted to do it through Office 365. But what we want to do is to go down here to Azure Active Directory. Now, if I click on this, you'll see that immediately it says I can't quite do it because I don't actually have an account and I'd have to sign up and so forth. So I'm going to skip this for now. You can also just as easily go directly to the portal for Microsoft Azure. And doing that, I'm just going to log in with my credentials. The username and the password can be the same. Even though I've never signed up for Azure yet, it will recognize this as an Office 365 username and password and kind of give me a free pass to at least get in the door here to continue the sign-up process. That way, I don't have to have a separate sign-on for Azure and different from Office 365. And then once you enter in all the appropriate information, it'll start to create your subscription to Microsoft Azure. So we'll let this finish and we'll resume when it's done. All right, and now we have the service is ready. After you enter in other things such as credit card information and things like that. Now, they're not going to charge your credit card immediately. They're asking me to sign in again. They're not going to charge your credit card immediately if you're on a trial basis. That's just kind of there as a placeholder, if you will. And then if you want to go ahead and convert to a full service here a little bit later on, you can. I actually decided to do that in my case because I might want to use this for some other things later on. So I just went ahead and put my credit card information in and went to the pay-as-you-go version of Azure. Now here I went ahead and skipped the introduction. There will be a kind of next finish introduction if you want to see kind of a basic tutorial, but I skipped that because we don't really want to use all of the various features of Microsoft Azure. We're mostly interested in the Active Directory portion of this, but notice that I went here to manage.windowsazure.com. There are several things you can do with this. For example, you can put a database up on the cloud for easy accessibility, for example. You can put your own virtual machines up there. This is very, very cost effective. And if you do a cost analysis of this, or just Google for a cost analysis of Microsoft Azure, you'll find that it's often substantially less expensive to use Microsoft's virtual machines here in the cloud than it is to have your own on-prem servers. So this is really could be a cost-saving measure for you there, but we're mostly interested in here, Active Directory. So we'll go ahead and go down there. So down here under Active Directory, we're pointing to our organization, and as I click on that, we get a few different options. There's a quick start that we can go through here, but the main idea is that we could add a domain. Now, we've already done that through Office 365, and in fact, if I click Add a Domain and try to add in, oh, what have I got? jamesconrad.photos again, it'll error out and tell me that I've already got that added in. So we're good with that. We're already done there. But what we want to do here is to download Azure Adconnect. This is a tool that will synchronize my on-prem Active Directory with Active Directory at Azure. And that way my users can have a single sign-on, meaning that they don't have to have two separate passwords for the same user ID. Because remember, they have an ID in Office 365, but they can also have an ID on-prem. We don't want those to be separate and distinct. We want them to be able to, at least for the user, be practically the same. And then once the tool is downloaded, I just copied it over to my domain controller here. It doesn't have to be put on a domain controller, but you do have to understand that once you run this tool, it's also going to synchronize every couple or few hours the user's passwords, maybe other object information from your on-premises Active Directory up to the cloud. And so you want to make sure that wherever you put and install this tool, that it's highly available. For example, you wouldn't want to put this on somebody's laptop, that as soon as they close the lid and take it home, you don't have any synchronization anymore. Or even maybe a desktop workstation. So some kind of a always-on server would be a good idea here. And I'm going to go ahead and next through this as we get going. Pretty simple beginning stuff here. I won't belabor any of this kind of thing. But we could also then choose a couple of different ways of doing this. We could go with an Express Settings option here, and you can learn more about that if you want to. That's what we're going to do here because, again, this is not even in the exam objectives. I just want to show you this as an important part of probably actually using Azure and Office 365 and later on Intune. This is potentially a big part of that whole process. So we're going to go with the Express Settings, which is going to do all of these things, but additional things you could do if you went down here to customize is you could use a federation server, which means that the actual authentication of your users still takes place on-prem for you. And then once it's the user's authenticated, the federation server contacts the Azure server and says, okay, this user is authenticated, now you can go ahead and use them in the cloud. So it's kind of that like that. You can also do this so that it would only work with maybe a single OU if you want to, instead of an entire Active Directory. But I'm going to go ahead and choose Express Settings for my entire AD. Here I'm just going to enter in the username of the account. So I'm going to be with a trainer at jamesconrad.photos, and the password. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and click on Next. Now these are my Azure Active Directory credentials. Okay, so remember that might have a different username and password than what you do for your on-premises Active Directory. Just be aware of that. You'll have to enter those in on both sides. And then, as if on cue, here comes up the other part of this. So this is going to be my James Conrad trainer account on-prem, on my local Active Directory domain services, as it says right up here, and the password here as well. Hopefully I typed it in right, and then we go ahead and click on Next. Okay, that seems to be good. Now what you'll see it do is all of the things that it bullet points for us right here. This is going to configure the connector, make sure that we have password synchronization, and so forth. Again, this makes sure that my users, when they log on, say, to their laptop computer, it's going to have the same username and password as what they use for Office 365 and any of the other cloud services for which we're going to have synchronization here. So they don't, again, have to have two separate passwords or anything like that. All right, it says that the synchronization and the configuration is now complete, and so I can log into Azure or Office 365 portals, and then we can confirm that they have the accounts from my local Active Directory. So we'll go ahead and exit out of this, and then I'm just going to go ahead and pop on over to my admin portal on Office 365. So now if I go down here to Users and then Active Users, I should see, hopefully, all of my user accounts that came from Active Directory on-prem. Remember, I only had, I think it was 2 accounts before, H. Hansen or Haley Hansen, and my trainer account. Now I should see, yes, there they are, all these other accounts that come actually from Active Directory. Notice that they also now say synced with Active Directory. Okay, so prior to this, they would have said in cloud over here because I created them, say, in Office 365 or maybe in Azure if I was only using Azure, and they only existed in Microsoft's version of Active Directory, not the one that's synchronized with my local Active Directory. But here we are indeed synced. Now, another thing to realize with this is that none of these users have an Office 365 license yet. So I would probably want to do that as well if that's my main goal, is to get them working with that. So notice that if I select a user, or you can shift select multiple users here if you want to as well, then what we could do is to go over here to where it says assigned license and choose edit. Then it'll ask what location they're in. Microsoft has an amazingly distributed data center structure for all of their Office and all of their cloud functions, actually. Some of them are many, many football fields long. They're just huge. So anyway, I'll give it my nearest location, and then it will pick my data center based upon geographic location. So I'm going to choose United States and Office 365 Enterprise. Okay, E3. So now that I've done that, I can save that, and when the user logs on, they should be able to access Office 365. And in fact, what do you know, but I happen to have another window open where they've already got a login here. And again, this is just going to use the same username and password as they used to log on to their local desktop computer. And when they do so now, we'll see that they have access to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and OneNote, and anything else that's part of this Office 365 subscription. In this nugget, we looked at Office 365. We learned how to synchronize Active Directory accounts, particularly using the Azure Active Directory Connect tool. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.